Bombing on both sides continue in Iran, but Donald isn't calling it a war.
And I didn't want to go during the war. I said, look, we have a thing called a war, or as they would rather say, a military operation.
Showing a willingness to do the activity nobody wants, but the courtesy to call it a different word. Kind of like forcing his wiener up your hiney and calling it making love. And so here's how the lovemaking with Iran is going. The US got involved after the Mossad sold Trump on targeted strikes, leading to an Iranian uprising, leaving questions of why our intelligence agencies were trusting an Israeli salesperson. The Americans pushed forward with the Reagan mantra,
during peace through strength,
leaving Hegseth confused with, I quote, "But sir, the showing strength back." The US is using a strategy of negotiating with bombs.
And that's why we see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs.
With Iran taking an active role in the negotiations and bombing back. As the war wages on, Trump has threatened to bring an end to the war by pushing up the escalation ladder, saying, "I'll go up this ladder. Nobody goes up ladders higher than me. I'll go to the tippy top of this ladder. Hell, I'll go all the way to war crimes."
Plans. Under international law, striking civilian infrastructure like that is generally prohibited. Why is the president threatening what would amount to potentially a war crime with the U.S. military? And how do you square that with the administration repeatedly saying that the U.S. does not target civilians?
Look, the president has made it quite clear to the Iranian regime at this moment in time, as evidenced by the statement that you just read, that their best move is to make a deal, or else the United States Armed Forces has capabilities beyond their wildest imagination, and the president is not afraid to use them.
As the war progresses, every single Iranian response is immediately framed as fresh evidence of why we needed to attack them first.
And fourth, they're stopping a maritime international route, energy route, and trying to blackmail the entire world. What more proof do you need that this regime that threatens the entire world has to be stopped?
Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a week in Iran. Imagine a year from now.
Which is the wargaming you get from the U.S. Department of Crazy Bitch. The U.S. Department of Crazy Bitch is also responsible for telling our allies we didn't need their naval help, and then getting furious when they didn't show up even though we told them not to, because we wanted them to want to be there. As more coverage of the war we are winning comes out, we find out that winning includes the destruction of all of our bases in the area and Iranian control of critical shipping lanes. With an American problem of having destroyed 95% of Iranian stockpiles, only for the last 5% to be self-rejuvenating and somehow back to 60%. Having observers wonder if perhaps Iran is having its own Hanukkah miracle. Meanwhile, Trump is trying to negotiate with Iran, who is responding with this.
Say, I'm not a pedophile.
I'm not a pedophile.
Other countries just want their oil, and are now willing to end the war and pay Iran for Hormuz access, giving an off-ramp to the war, with the US sending Marines into the Hormuz to blow up that off-ramp. The new Hormuz arrangement is particularly bad for Israel, who is claiming that Iran is irrational and can't be dealt with, leaving some wondering if Israelis think that charging money for something that used to be free is irrational, and how that ties into Netanyahu's plan of bypassing what was once the free straits and instead paying Israel for pipeline rights.
Is to have alternative routes instead of going through the choke points of the Hormuz Straits and the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. In order to have the flow of oil, just have oil pipelines, gas pipelines going west through the Arabian Peninsula, right up to Israel, right up to our Mediterranean ports, and you've just done away with the choke points for forever.
With conservative commentators now calling for boots on the ground.
Here is the thing. If you look historically, the American people actually have some patience. Weeks. And also, Americans are not dumb. We don't believe that if you're involved in military activity, you're not going to lose anybody. Because, again, if necessary military activity can only be pursued at zero cost, there's no use in having a military.
There's a nationwide push to form a committee for the responsible moving of goalposts, just so the public can keep some sanity and track what we're pretending the plan is this week. Meanwhile, the match continues. Houthis just entered the ring. Israeli settlers have entered the ring. Lebanon's buildings have entered the ring. So as this non-war rages on, The biggest question left is if there will be American soldiers invading Iran and how terribly unfair and mean Iran will be for fighting back against them.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Run Your Mouth podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that intro. Probably not going to do another one of those. That one took me way too much time. If you guys knew how much time that took me. And I think the first one came out a little better. I think I listened to a different newsreel, and the guy had more of a Brooklyn voice. And mine, as Slav is pointing out, was kept venturing into Bernie Sanders, and I kept trying to redo it. Whatever, it was fun. If you got a friend out there that hasn't been covering the Iran war at all, has no idea what's going on, go share that with them. And I think that 4-minute summary is a pretty good look into the lunacy of what we are all experiencing. Episode brought to you by YoKratom.com, home of the $60 kilo. Only place in the entire world you can get a full kilo of Kratom for just $6. So let's get into some of the recent news, and I want to start with this, which was the Kash Patel hack, which, you would think if we were going to get someone's private email, man, would we get some juicy dirt. I mean, my life's not that exciting, but you could probably find an email somewhere in my emails that would make the front page of the newspaper. I'm sure I've said something horrendously horrible in an email. I'm sure there's some embarrassing emails in there, and I'm just being, it's always nice to start the show with pure conspiracy and just absolute nonsense. But my first thought when that came out was that was a play by Iran being like, we got more. We're just letting you know, we got some stuff. And if you guys are involved in this war because of some other state secrets, we got pretty good hackers over here. And you might find that we've got that information as well. It just felt like there must have been more of a play there. Now, I went off on this a little bit in the intro. I also talked about it on Part of the Problem. But there's something quite fascinating to me about other countries now paying Iran for usage of the Hormuz Strait, because it basically does, in a way, sound like an off-ramp to the war. Now, Donald Trump made a really bad blunder in terms of getting us into this mess. And maybe it's because Netanyahu lied to him and said, listen, this is our one chance to do it. And if we do it now, the people, they're ready to revolt. They're going to revolt, and they're going to take out their own regime. And we're going to have better partners there forever. We can both get in on the oil business. We can both make some money here. And you never have to hear me yelling about Iran again. And at least you get a fresh storyline as I'll start going off on Turkey. Well, sometimes it's nice to at least freshen up the storyline and hear about a different country that's always been an existential threat, always wanted to kill us, and if we don't take them out now, they're going to take us out first. You get to rehash all the old talking points, but at least there's a new villain. At least there's something fresh and new. It's not the 30-year-old storyline. And anyways, in terms of all the countries buying oil from Iran, it sounds like we got a pathway for everyone getting along here. The problem is if everyone starts getting along with Iran, where does that leave Israel? It leaves Israel as the menace in the Middle East that can't get along with everybody, that everyone else is willing to go, hey, we need some oil. You got some oil. Let us buy your oil. There's enough profit in this oil. We'll pay you for the Hormuz Strait, and we'll reimburse you for all that war damage that happened. And after Israel's been telling us for years that Iran is responsible for all the terrorism in the region, they're an agent of chaos and everybody hates them, it seems like if Donald Trump just wants to walk away from the Hormuz Strait, all the European countries have no interest in getting involved in this thing, and then a peace deal is basically worked out where now everyone's got to pay Iran for oil access. The only real losers in that game is Israel in a big way. Which then makes you wonder if Donald Trump finally has the balls to go through with the breakup with Israel, if Israel then escalates to nuking Iran, or if Donald Trump has already dug his heels in, or for whatever reason he got into this mess on behalf of Israel, he's fully pot committed. Now, I do think there's a bit of an issue for America because, we're supposed to, our threats are supposed to mean something. If we're going to go dismantle you, you're supposed to fear, oh my God, I don't want to pick a fight with these people. Then you also got questions of how important the petrodollar actually is for the dollar. But then you got to wonder if we keep this thing going where our economy is now and we keep sending up oil prices, just how catastrophic that will be. And if perhaps cutting our losses, breaking up with Israel, and then figuring out how to, re-implement our will on the world, which is really just grow our economy and come up with technological developments that people just want stuff from us also, and we have something to trade with them. It doesn't have to be the most complicated thing of we need a military, we need to go kill everybody all the time so that they're afraid of us. There's other pathways to success. But, Donald Trump now, we're hearing mixed stories. He's flirting with the ground war and sending people in, I guess, to take Karg Island or to remove all of the nuclear materials that were left in the country. Obviously, not only have they walked back their complete lie of completely obliterated, but now they're starting to play around with, hey, there's a real risk to the nuclear material that we left there. Even if they don't get a bomb, they can get a dirty bomb, which is all just proof of that single strike that they did 6 months ago didn't really accomplish anything. And if it did accomplish anything, maybe it had Iran nervous that we meant business. And that would be the ultimate proof of the fact that Trump should have taken the deal before he started this war, when Iran was willing to go down in its enrichments. The one thing they didn't want to do was give up their ballistic missile programs, because that's basically going, hey, can you guys make it easier for us to come back here and attack you guys the next time? That was a ridiculous request, and Donald Trump decided instead to take out the mullah, or the Ayatollah. And now we're in this big escalating mess where everyone's like, keep us out of this and figure out how to get me my oil back. So with that, let's take a look at some of the most recent news stories, get the full breakdown. I'm going to tell you guys everything that's going on. Are you guys in the chat? Have I completely lost sound and I'm just talking to myself? Usually at this point in the show, we're wild with comments, and I don't see any comments. I see nothing. I see a blank screen, like I am just talking to myself, and that either nobody can hear me or that nobody's there. But, we'll continue with the show, and then I'll find out at the end. All right, you guys are here. Cool. I guess all right, cool. Adam Sutton's there. Good enough. As long as people can hear me and I'm not just talking to myself and I find out that I got to redo the entire episode, because that's painful. But, Donald Trump, not only does he have not enough things named after him, not enough gold placards all over the place, not enough gold coins being made while he's still president, commemorating how incredible his presidential run is. But the latest is, for the first time, I think ever, he wants to change the signature on our currency to his own signature. And it would be funny if that just marks the end of our currency. Now, I don't really think our currency needs a signature on it. I think they just need to make it in a way so that you can be sure that it's not counterfeited, so that only the banks can have the ability to counterfeit and print money that nobody earned. That's supposed to be the sole right of the banks, is backed up by the Federal Reserve. And we all understand the importance for our economy that banks can just manufacture money, but that nobody else can just manufacture a $100 bill, go to their liquor store, get themselves a pack of cigarettes and some free booze. That would be theft. That would undermine our entire economy. We can only have the banks being able to do that. But as Donald Trump wants to make sure that we all understand how incredibly great he is in celebration of the war that he's winning, and the fact that his name is not on enough various items, the latest is that he wants to put his signature right on our currency, which, if he keeps the war going and crashes our economy, that might be a fun way to celebrate the end of the U.S. dollar. Now, Donald Trump's latest is talks of, I'm negotiating with them, they love me, we're working it out. I'll give them 5 days, I'll blow them up, make that 10 days, make it 15 days. They're talking to me, we're doing so good. And, after Donald Trump has made the hardline threats of, hey, I'll give you guys 10 days, but, don't be touching no boats. And then, of course, Israel just continues to bomb infrastructure in Iran. But, if you're wondering how those negotiations are going, the latest is that Iran just blew up I think it was a Kurdish oil tanker, completely full. The attack follows Trump's Monday threat to begin completely obliterating Iran's energy infrastructure and oil reserve if a deal between the two sides is not shortly reached. The warning followed earlier promises to hold off on attacks on these facilities amid continuing negotiations between the countries. And while Donald Trump continues to say, we're negotiating, we're figuring it out, Iran has turned around and, did exactly what Donald Trump told them not to do. I believe they also struck desalination and power plants within Israel, and they also blew up a $300 million plane. So if you guys are listening to the latest from Donald Trump, who's flirting with walking away from the Hormuz Strait, sending in the military, and actually doing a ground strike, all while pretending like he's negotiating, and that he's going to be taking out critical civilian infrastructure within Iran unless they immediately acquiesce to our demands. It does not sound or seem like Iran is actually taking part in these negotiations, as they are violating the red lines that Trump keeps stating. And the next thing to note is that for a long time, the pitch from our military was, listen, we've dominated their Navy. We took him out. We've dominated their Air Force, and we've got full air superiority. It's nothing but smooth sailing from here, and we are taking out all of their critical stockpiles of drones and on strategic weapons. And for weeks, I kept hearing 90 to 95% completely obliterated. And then I think that was actually a tricky claim of that it wasn't 95% obliterated, but they had reduced their strikes by 95%. Now, reducing the strikes because you sent off the cheap stuff at first to degrade people's ability to intercept missiles, and then you go with more strategic strikes later, is not much of a victory claim. But I did think it was funny that they kept telling us, hey, we're completely dominating this thing and we're taking out all their stuff, and yet they keep finding new targets. And now the latest is that Iran might still retain, after a full month of taking out critical targets, they might still retain 60% of their, ballistic missiles and drone capabilities. And then on that note today, it was a big celebration of that we took out one of their critical sites where they're manufacturing weapons, which makes you wonder, why didn't you do that earlier? You guys had a whole month of telling us you were taking out everything. Did you first find this place? And if you're first finding this place, does that mean that there's other places that you guys aren't aware of or still have to find? And then this one, as long as we're exploring all of the lunacy here and the lies that are coming our way, this is from the New York Post. They're trying to sell you on this war. They're trying to sell you on that we got to stay in this thing, and then it's winnable. And now the most recent claim, this is from an ex-U.S. general who insists Iran campaign is further along than expected based on years of simulations, which is convenient to tell me now after you had said originally this would take weeks, not months. So now that the thing is ongoing, they want to let you know we are winning, and we're actually ahead of schedule on our winning, even though that timeline is not in line with what we initially told you guys for how short this war would be. And here's Marco Rubio saying the same thing. Let's roll a clip. I think I finally actually figured out perfect sound here. Oddly enough, I had this grand plan that I was going to start running everything through the board. I'd press the record button, and then I would actually re-release the episodes with newly mastered sound in case things came in softly. And then, of course, I forgot to press the record button because producer man was distracting me. He decided to wear a real sexy outfit today, and it was distracting. And even though I came in early to test new sound to make sure it was all working, he distracted me, and I failed to press that record button. But anyways, we keep experimenting on the show that's only been going for 10 years and trying to figure out how to get that perfectly crispy sound of a more professional operation. And I think I finally have it for you. I think I finally found the right experiment and figured out how to get this to play properly. And you guys live right now can be the judge and tell me if this clip actually has sound. Roll the clip, producer man.
And at the end of the day, I think that if there are people in Iran who now, given everything that's happened, are willing to move in a different direction for their country, that would be great. Imagine in Iran that instead of spending their wealth, billions of dollars supporting terrorists or weapons, had spent that money helping the people of Iran, you'd have a much different country. So we are always hopeful that that would exist over there.
All right, I got to replay that clip because I was reading comments instead of listening, and I think the next Rubio clip was the clip that I was thinking of. And listen, sometimes you have moments where your brain just goes to another place, and it's a short clip, so let's just replay it and then we'll comment.
And at the end of the day, I think that if there are people in Iran who now, given everything that's happened, are willing to move in a different direction for their country, that would be great. Imagine in Iran that instead of spending their wealth, billions of dollars supporting terrorists or weapons, had spent that money helping the people of Iran, you'd have a much different country.
Yeah, imagine if our country did that also. What a great plan, Marco Rubio. What if someone ran for president on representing the American people and fixing problems here instead of spending all of our nation's wealth and resources that we don't have because we're in debt, bombing other countries as well? Also, what percentage of Iran's GDP and wealth goes annually to their military expenditures versus the United States of America, particularly that we don't just fund our wars, we fund other people's wars. Remember NATO and how we're all in it together and we all have to stand up to Russia? And then when we turned to them and said, listen, we need you guys to get in on this action. This oil is more important for you. And they're all like, we want nothing to do with this. We pay for those wars also. What a great strategy, Marco Rubio. I love that. I stand by this 100%. Nations, instead of using all of their civilians' money and future money and money that they don't have, bombing places across the globe, instead of just building up critical infrastructure in their own country and making their lives better for the civilians who live there, would be a better strategy. Who would have thought I'd ever agree with Marco Rubio? But here's Marco Rubio on the timetable of the war. I had the videos in the wrong order. Roll the clip, producer, man.
This operation, okay, and that's what this is about very specific objectives. The president laid them out on the first night of the operation. I'll repeat them to you now because I hear a lot of talk about we don't know what the clear objectives are. Here they are. You should write them down. Number one, the destruction of their Air Force. Number two, the destruction of their Navy. Number three, the severe diminishing of their missile launching capability.
That's interesting that now it's no longer no missiles. It's just a severe diminishing. A pathway for victory, everybody, is just declaring that we won. You let Iran keep the Hormuz Strait. You let them keep the nuclear material that they had. You allow them to continue to have ballistic missiles. And you go, well, we took out the Ayatollah and we replaced him with his younger gay son. But victory.
And number four, the destruction of their factories so they can't make more missiles and more drones to threaten us in the future. All of this so that they can never hide behind it to acquire a nuclear weapon. That was our objective from the beginning.
And what's nice about this objective list is that it does not include the Hormuz Strait. So at least we do have the off-ramp that Donald Trump can walk away from this mess and go, totally won. I never cared about the straits. That's not what I cared about.
Remains our objective now. We are on pace and, in fact, ahead of schedule on some of those things.
Now, that's the really remarkable claim, is that we're on pace and ahead of schedule. I believe, you guys are in the chat. Go find me the clip when Rubio said that this was going to be weeks, not months, because I know that they were making fun of him when he was out in Europe just the other day, saying this is going to be quick and we're already a month into the war. But, I think they pretty clearly lied to us on the timetable of this war. If now we're already a month in and they're going, we're ahead of schedule. So there was an initial schedule for this not just to be a week-long excursion.
And we are going to achieve those things in a number of weeks, not in a number of months.
Well, we're already over a month in. So I guess if you don't count the first month, it's a little bit like when they start talking about inflation and they go, well, the rate of inflation is down. So it's like we'll be 3 months into the war and they'll be like, guys, we can win this war in a couple weeks. I mean, don't count the 3 months before we got to these 3 weeks that we need to win the war. But we're just a couple weeks away from a victory here. All right, and next we got, this is from the Washington Examiner. Netanyahu says Iran war beyond the halfway point. Trump tells Trump to ignore anti-war polls. And so, they sold us into this or blackmailed him into it. Depends on how conspiratorial you want to go. But for some reason, Donald Trump got into this mess. I think we can all agree that it was on behalf of Israel and that it was a mistake and was not in our strategic interest. And unless we've got some ground invasion up our sleeves, which is actually quite incredible, and the American people have the stomach for, we're not going to get the full regime change, control of their Hormuz Strait, and Iran to apologize and recognize Donald Trump's greatness. And now Netanyahu, they don't even want to commit troops, or at least I was seeing that on Twitter. They want America. They're already busy. Amidst starting this chaos with Iran, they decided, you know what, instead of committing troops to help the Americans go do a ground war in Iran, let's take the opportunity to seize up land in Lebanon. And now you've got Netanyahu claiming, guys, we're beyond the halfway point. We just have to keep going. But then within the own article, he walks it back and goes beyond the halfway in terms of missions, not necessarily in terms of time, he clarified. All right, well, that doesn't even sound like that promising of a lie. So we're halfway there in terms of the missions, but the rest of the missions might actually take a lot more resources, a lot more death, and a lot more time. But just in terms of the missions of what we were looking to accomplish, it sounds like we're not halfway there. It just sounds like you're lying. And then this was Netanyahu. if you work by the polls, I mean, I'm not saying politicians ignore polls. Everyone looks at them. But if this is the only thing that decides your course of action, you're not a leader, you're a follower, Netanyahu added. And here he is poking at Donald Trump. Remember how he said Donald Trump doesn't listen to anybody? Donald Trump does what he wants to do. Now he's poking at Donald Trump and going, what, are you going to actually listen to the American people and what the American people want? That's not what being a leader is. A leader is not figuring out what people want, telling them, I'm going to be the best at representing you in your interests, which included no new wars. A leader is about lying to people so that they can get in control and then make decisions that the people don't want and pretending like that's what's actually in their interest. That's the pitch from Netanyahu. And now we do have more information actually coming out about the fact that this war is not going as well as Donald Trump had claimed. Firstly, you had that recent storyline of that we can only account for having destroyed actually 30% of their critical stockpiles on missiles and munitions. Then we've got that they just destroyed airplanes in Saudi Arabia. Next, we've got Donald Trump commenting on the aircraft carrier that for a long time we heard that it was mutiny amongst the sailors, that they were lighting their own clothes on fire and stuffing the toilets. But here's Donald Trump addressing that.
Platform. We knew there was a problem when we noticed at 1 o'clock in the morning, every 32 seconds, another airplane, a very fast plane, was coming off the deck of an aircraft carrier. That's actually the biggest aircraft carrier in the world. And every 32 seconds, boom, boom, boom. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning. So we said, okay, I think we're in trouble. But they were ready for us, Johnny. And we were ready. He said, we were ready. And then they hit us. And they came from 17 different angles. They were here, they were there. We ran for our lives. It was over. And it was.
All right. I believe he's talking about the Gerald Ford there. And I guess that it was actually taken out of commission from Iran. That's at least the way I understand that video, which would be quite a different story than what we were hearing for a long time. In terms of different stories than what we've heard from a long time, is that apparently 13 U.S. bases are inhabitable. Remember, we're totally demolishing this thing. We're totally winning it. This thing could not be going better. And now a few more stories are coming out that are painting a different picture. Luckily, Americans are very well trained for remote work. If there was ever an army that could sit at home, sit at their computers, masturbate, take 17 coffee breaks, and pretend like they were getting things done without showing up to a base or office, it's the one thing that Americans might be qualified for. And now we got Caroline Levitt, assuming the video is actually here, and I just can't believe how bitchy the administration has gotten in terms of addressing some of these issues. Let's roll the tape.
President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. If they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. Their entire leadership has been killed, and nobody has really seen or legitimately heard from this alleged new leader. So wouldn't you say there's been a change in the regime?
There's been a change in leadership. I mean, do you feel as though...
There's been a change in the regime leadership.
So there you go. Firstly is if these assholes won't admit to the fact that they've already lost the war, while they're still pretty much engaging in the fight and picking up leverage in terms of negotiations, which we're going to see in a second, that Donald Trump has dropped the talking point of Iran being allowed to have ballistic missiles. But if they're not willing to recognize the fact that they're losing this fight, Donald Trump leaves all options on the table to make them actually come to their senses and stop being unreasonable and realize that they're losing, which includes war crimes. And also, how dare you say that we don't have regime change? Sure, it's the son of the guy, and they still, are at war with us, and we don't really have a counterparty that has now brought democracy to the region. But, we killed one guy to start the thing, so we did have the regime change. And I guess if that was your only goal, we could have just stopped after day one.
Which is what the president said. So thank you for confirming he was right.
Thank you for confirming he was right.
As President Trump announced on Monday, the United States has been engaged over the last 3 days in productive conversations, which led the president to temporarily instruct the Department of War to postpone planned strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure only. The remaining elements of the Iranian regime have another opportunity to cooperate with President Trump, permanently abandoned their nuclear ambitions.
Look how nice the United States of America is. They're giving them another chance here.
Cease actively threatening America and our allies. But the president's preference is always peace. There does not need to be any more death and destruction. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
Yeah. All right. Well, so listen, they make it seem like it's a person in a fight. You've already knocked them out. They're down on the floor. Neither of their legs work because you kicked out their legs. They're painting it like the Monty Python of the guy with no arms and legs going, "Tis is but a scratch." And that's the way that Iran is operating. So, you can put this one down on your list of complete and total lies from the regime, because we'll see how much more we lose if we continue to fight them and pretend like they're just totally out of the fight. All right, what do I got next for everybody? We got more on this topic. All right, here's some ideas for how we can actually deal with Donald Trump and all the chaos that we have to listen to from the regime. And this is from The Hill. And, it verifies something that I had said earlier about Donald Trump. So I'll read it first, then I'll comment, and then I'll go to the chat because it's very active. We'll see what you guys are getting into. The Hill. One person we talked to said, look, when the president asks for something twice, we have an unofficial rule, which is that we do it, Parker said in a recent podcast. And I said, well, why twice? And they said, well, to be fair, he does a lot of crazy things, but if he says it a second time, we know he's serious. And we know regardless of whether it's to fire the board of the Kennedy Center and take it over or potentially march on Greenland, if that's what he wants, we are there to make that happen. And I had a boss like that once where I would wait for a second request because they said insane shit all the time. And so if they didn't come back and it was still on their mind a week later, then you knew that it was a direction the company was going in. And if not, it was just some ADD, frantic, insane moment. But I've been saying for a while, maybe what we need to do with Donald Trump is just, maybe what we need to start doing is recording Donald Trump and then just playing that information like a week later. Just don't listen to it the day it comes out because he's just saying insane shit and he's not going to stand by it. Whatever Donald Trump says within a 24-hour period, there's no reason of even absorbing and criticizing because he's not going to stand within a 24-hour period. I wonder if someone can run, if you're a statistician, run an analysis on how many things within a 7-day period Donald Trump still stands by. Maybe there's a way that we could just take in everything Donald Trump, like, the monthly, the weekly, and the daily scorecard of how many things he just flip-flops in within those time periods, and then we can come to a better understanding of when to actually tune into Donald Trump or which version of Donald Trump is the version that he's going to actually move forward with. There's the day of who says the insane thing. There's the day later when he just doubles down. Then there's the 3 days later where he somewhat walks it back. And then the 4 days later where he claims that it was already done. I mean, there's just, there's got to be some sort of a way that we can study the data on this and just have a better platform for knowing what Donald Trump's actual agenda is and stop just taking in all the lunacy of things that he says day of. I mean, it's remarkable to have a president. It's on the level of Joe Biden, fully dementiaed, and he would make statements and the White House would go, well, that doesn't represent the White House, as if the White House was its own independent entity. And so now Donald Trump doesn't actually represent Donald Trump. And so if Donald Trump said anything today, it doesn't mean anything until he confirms it. We need the Donald Trump 24-hour confirmation where we call him up and go, hey, you made this statement. Are you still standing by? It's a full 24 hours later. Are you still standing by that one? All right, let's take some comments and then we'll move on with more of our coverage of the Iran war. Student 171625, was the goal making Iran stronger and more united? Well, listen, if they got to declare victories, maybe they'll turn around and say, we always wanted a more united Iran. John Popick, Robbie worked for Trump. Well, no, it wasn't Trump. Corn Pop Pomenade. I'm starting to come around to the idea that it's just market manipulation. Well, it's something that we've joked around on this podcast. I think they're seizing the opportunity for market manipulation. I don't think they actually got involved in this mess to manipulate markets, because I think there's plenty of profit and grifting opportunities out of the United States government that they can't be this evil that they would get us into this size of a mess just so that they could front run markets and grift a little bit more profit out of the system before they collapse the whole thing. I just think that there's enough other ways for them to grift. Donald Trump can launch another Bible. He can sell more sneakers. He can sell another Melania coin. He can have Melania do another documentary. He's got so many more avenues for continuing to pimp out Melania before he needs to explore, hey, let's go start a war, open the straits, close the straits, reopen the straits, then close the straits, then bomb them, then say we're not bombing them, and just continuously front run the markets. I can't believe that they're that desperate for money and that they can't come up with better ways to grift off the system, that they would go through with that just to front run markets. I believe that once this is happening, some people are seizing on the opportunities to do some insider trading, but I don't think they did it with that actual intent. Pumpkin 08K, the stupid blonde lady told them they lost. What more do they need to know? Yeah, you know, if someone could just get that message to the people in Iran who are currently putting up a hell of a fight and making a real mess for Donald Trump. If maybe they don't understand that they lost, and so maybe if they can have Caroline Levitt yelling at them, they would actually come to their senses. All right, let's move on with the show. And for anyone who likes to support our program, we're going to be doing like an extra probably 20 or 30 minutes at the end of the show at robbernsteincomedy.com. It's all $5 to subscribe. And I'm starting to play around with like ChatGPT more and try and get some new merch going. And I created this incredibly stupid mug. So if you're hoping for something that somewhat resembles my face in an Alice in Wonderland dress with a kind of trippy style, you can pick that up on my website. And that's a pretty good mug. I'm excited to drink some coffee from it, and not even expensive. I just mark things up $5 and then it's shipping and whatever it costs for the cheap crap from China until Donald Trump tariffs the hell out of it. I also put them on a pair of horrible shoes if you're a lady. They only had lady shoes and they were on sale. I was like, that could be fun. Anyway, support the show. robbernsteincomedy.com or robbernsteinmerch.com. Junior Toxicity. Who has better looking women, Iran or Israel? You know, for as ugly as Jew broads are, the Israeli ones are pretty hot. I haven't spent enough time in Iran, and there aren't enough footage of their women not in burqas for me to comment. But Israeli broads are pretty... Israeli broads have a look to them. Generally speaking, Jew broads, not really my cup of tea. And the Israeli broads, you can't date them because then you're just like, ah, shit, I invited Mossad into my life. Can't even sleep with them, you know? You gotta, someone tells you you're from Israel, you gotta put up your anti-Semitic front, you gotta show them your bald head, and you gotta let them know, I'm good. But the Israeli broads, there's some hot Israeli broads. The Iranian broads, you know, I don't know. They got to get them out of the burqas, then we can finally do a comparison. All right, and now here's another idea for how we could potentially end this war and, you know, just keep Donald Trump away from really tariffs and all the other messes that he's brought upon our country. And I'll roll the clip and then I'll tell you guys my suggestion for, you know, how we can better direct Donald Trump's energies so that we don't have to deal with these massive, wide-scale negative changes to our country. Roll the clip.
That's a beautiful tractor. That's a gold tractor. Somebody had me in mind. What's that all about? That's a hell of a tractor. I'm looking at this. That's a good one, too. Red, white, and blue. But somebody really hit me with that one. That's beautiful. Wow. So.
And that, you know what we got to do? We have to just somehow ADD Donald Trump off of these topics. Like CNN's got to run an article like we found Atlantis. Kim Jong-un's going to take it. Nobody in the world thinks Donald Trump can get to Atlantis first. Actually, we've got a magical secret document here that says that whoever can put their name in gold on more things gets to claim the treasure from Atlantis. And Donald, I'm so good at putting my name in gold on things. That was made for me. I'm going to claim the treasure for Atlantis for the American people. Everyone's going to be so happy when I get it. I'm so good at putting my name on gold on things. All right, and I got to play this next part because, you know, you guys can have fun with this. You can reclip it. You can take out the background. You can slap it wherever you'd like. But out of context, oh, my God, in terms of just the scandalous Epstein claims that, you know, were thrown out by the FBI and said that that they were, you know, not from credible witnesses, but just in terms of things that you don't want out of your mouth, I like the unused 10-year-old ones better. it's just you got to be a little bit more careful. I know you're talking about a tractor, but that's just not the kind of things you want to say for the internet to then play around with. So let's roll that clip.
When you buy a tractor today, you spend 50% of your time fixing the environmental impact statement garbage that's on the tractor. In fact, I buy a lot of things that having to do with farm equipment, where I own clubs and other things. And I said, give me 10-year-old equipment. Do you have any 10-year-old equipment that hasn't been used yet?
Tell me that doesn't sound bad.
And whenever they had it, I would buy it.
I love unused 10-year-old equipment.
Because it was much better than the new stuff, which has so much environment.
All right, I've had enough of that one. All right, what else we got, producer man? I know we got more show. Trump's 15-point Iran truce plan would let one terrifying threat slide. And I envision that Donald Trump sent the 15-point plan to them and said, if you don't agree to that, I'm sending you a 30-point plan, young mister. Gonna go up to 45. Give it another week. It's going to be a 60-point plan. And I don't think we ever actually saw what the 15 points were. I know that I saw the Iranian response of the 5 points that Iran was looking for, but I don't think at any point in time did I see the full 15-point plan. But here you've got the New York Post very upset with Donald Trump that the 15-point plan allows for Iran to have ballistic missiles for defense and security purposes, which is essentially just allowing them to have ballistic missiles and recognizing, oh, if we keep on threatening this country with invasion and Israel keeps acting as an aggressor towards Iran, it's unreasonable for them to be there without any army or military equipment, and there's no way that they will agree to it. And so apparently Donald Trump has come to his senses that that part of an agreement is an unworkable deal that then creates a situation where you have to fight a war with somebody, and that war is actually not that easily winnable and is creating quite a bit of a mess. But it also does indicate for all the people that think that we're just winning the war, such as Caroline Levitt, that the Iranians won't just accept that they've already lost and that it's time for them to realize that they've lost. Otherwise, it's just going to be worse for them. In terms of the actual negotiations behind the scenes, it seems that the Iranians have gained ground and that Donald Trump is now willing to give them something that he refused when they were originally first talking, which sounds like it's in the Iranian interest to keep going and to continue this war and seek out more leverage. But at the moment, it seems like they've spooked Donald Trump enough that he's willing to give up what some of the red lines were before the war. And of course, publications like the New York Post will criticize Donald Trump for that, saying, no, we got to fight this thing to the end because we can't allow them to be an autonomous country. And there's no way that they could be allowed to continue to have their military. And so if that's going to be one of the point of contentions as to whether or not they're allowed to keep any sort of military equipment so that countries don't constantly come back there and, create these kind of messes, then we got to fight this thing through to the end. And here you got Donald Trump annoyed with France, that France won't even allow us to use their airspace, which I think kind of speaks to the real battle that is going on now, which is not just between the United States and Iran and this war and who can, create more damages to get some leverage and bring the other one to the table, but also the storyline of all of the countries breaking up from Israel and going, we want no part of this thing. We don't want to be involved in this mess. What we'd like is if we could just get back to this oil business of monarchies in the Middle East who we buy oil from. We don't care about their civilians. We really don't care about this Greater Israel Project or Israel if it's getting in the way of our ability to just buy oil from these monarchies. And it's interesting that all of Europe, Asia, and the countries that really want oil are going, we don't want to be involved in this mess. And I think that there's going to be more pressure coming to, hey, we need Israel to quiet down a little bit because we want to get back to consuming oil. But here's Donald Trump.
French President Macron about the coalition to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, I have spoken to him. He's been on a scale of 0 to 10. I'd say he's been an 8. Not perfect, but it's France. We don't expect perfect.
Are you confident that France will help with the reopening of Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think he's going to help. I mean, I'll let you know. I spoke to him yesterday. I don't do a hard sell on them.
Well, we'll see how that plays out, but it seems like all of Europe wants nothing to do with this, and the movement is headed in the direction of throwing Israel under the bus. Now, this is from Axios. Wall Street Journal was also reporting that Donald Trump is willing to leave without the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. And I highlighted this line when asked about Trump's post on Tuesday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stopped short of calling the strait's reopening a core objective. I think that will be catastrophic for Israel and interesting if Donald Trump finally does walk away from it. But that's kind of the way the game's playing out now. Does Donald Trump declare victory, realize that this thing has been such a mess, and just, it's a move away from Israel, or are we fully baked into this thing and playing to the end? And now we've got the people who are pitching us on why we need ground troops. We've got both Ben Shapiro, we've got Mark Levin. They're out there moving the goalposts. It started from, guys, it's easy for us to do wars. We can do targeted strikes, declare victory. We don't have to be in the messes that we've been in before. And now we're shifting to, guys, we have a military. What's the point of a military if we're not going to use it? And we need to use it. And I just feel like this is COVID all over again. And this is why we can't flirt with government policies, because it starts with the 2 weeks to slow the curve to, hey, you're going to have to stay in your house for an entire year. Or in this case, hey, guys, just let us do a couple of targeted strikes. We're not going to get you into a whole mess. All right, well, we got a whole military. We might as well use the military. So let's listen to a little bit of Ben Shapiro's pitch for why we need to stay in this war and why it's okay if ground troops go in there and if people die. Let's listen to it.
Here is the thing. If you look historically, the American people actually have some patience. Our shortest wars were longer than the current conflict. The Persian Gulf War.
I'll just read this from Alan Thickdick. More soldiers are being deployed. I don't think we're de-escalating anytime soon. I think it's. I think you're probably right that Donald Trump wants to continue this thing. It is interesting to me though that he's flirting with, hey, I can just walk away from it, and then you always got the Donald Trump is going to put out screwy signals, pretending like he's playing 4D chess, but it does keep everyone on their toes of what exactly he's up to. But here we've got Ben Shapiro pitching us on why we need to have more involvement, and it's okay.
War involved 43 days of active operations. The Kosovo NATO air war lasted for 78 days. Even deposing Noriega in Panama in the late 80s, that lasted for 6 weeks. And also, Americans are not dumb. We don't believe that if you're involved in military activity, you're not going to lose anybody.
Right. We're not dumb. And that's when we said, hey, we think these targeted strikes are going to lead to a bigger mess. And now they are leading to a bigger mess. We weren't dumb when we said that. Yes, we actually do fully understand that flirting with military entanglements can lead to a 20-year Afghanistan thing, a whole Iraq thing, costing us a ton of money and killing people for no reason. Exactly. We're not dumb. That's why we warned you guys about getting into this mess. And now he's turning it around to, oh, Americans aren't dumb. You guys understand that if we're going to fight people, we're going to have to fight people. Yeah, that's why we criticize this.
Because, again, if necessary military activity can only be pursued at zero.
And there you go. If necessary military activity. Well, what deems this necessary military activity? Was the United States of America invaded? Is Hitler back on the loose, taking over all of Europe? Has somebody threatened us with nuclear warheads? Yeah, sure. Once again, we're not dumb. So we agree with you. If there's an actual need for military activity, Americans will engage in military activity, and they'll understand that it was necessary. But when it's not necessary, or you haven't explained to us why it's necessary, then we will go, hey, maybe targeted strikes aren't a good idea because they're going to lead to a bigger escalation. And a bigger escalation might mean that we end up in another war that we don't need to be in. And then he flips the script and goes, well, yeah, I guess the strikes did lead to a bigger war, but now this is a necessary war. And so you guys aren't babies. You understand that once it's a necessary, yeah, well, we didn't have to be in a necessary war.
Zero cost, there's no use in having a military. Literally, the point of a military is to do hard and
I'm okay with that too. You want to just not have the military, save all the money, spend it on other things, and then not have the ability to get into those messes. I mean, that does leave us more vulnerable, but there's an argument that it might even be worth the trade-off because then we won't flirt with all these other things that aren't necessary and end up in them.
and dangerous things. That's why our military members are heroes. That's because they're willing to undertake that sacrifice for a greater good. Now, Iran, for its part, seems to be counting on this view of Americans that have been shared by pretty much all of our enemies at one time or another, that were weaklings, that were incapable of mobilizing for victory. Hitler famously.
You see, all of us not wanting to partake in wars is what's giving these victories to our enemies. But really, if we could just be as psychotic as our enemies who don't understand when they've lost, and we would be more okay with aggression, or maybe our history of failed wars over the last 30 years makes us think that this is dumb. Maybe after Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, we're going, hey, I don't think that this is worth all the money that we're spending and that we're engaging in wars that are unnecessary.
Famously thought that America was decadent and unstable. In one private conversation, according to sort of Hitler's notes, reportedly he said, quote, "I don't see much future for the Americans. It's a decayed country. They have the racial problem, the problem of social inequalities. Everything about the behavior of American society reveals that it's half Judaized and the other half nigrified." And this is Hitler talking. How can one expect a state like that to hold together? And during Vietnam, the Viet Cong counted on the idea that Americans...
All right, I've had enough of this. Now, I believe that I put this video out of order, but on my Kash Patel theory, here is that new Iranian propaganda guy, keeps putting out videos mocking Donald Trump, but I believe that this is him talking about the Kash Patel leak and that they have more information coming. Let's roll a clip.
Trump, رئیس جمهور آمریکا.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to lower the volume. We'll do the CNN thing and I'll read the transcript for all the people who only listen and don't watch. Repeatedly threatened Iran with ground operations and the occupation of some islands in the Persian Gulf. There is no doubt that the U.S. president, under pressure from the terrorist organization Mossad due to his background in the Epstein case, has become a pawn of the Israeli prime minister in the war and aggression against Iran. The U.S. president, who is known as the most lying president in the world and has no intellectual or rhetorical stability, if is not trustworthy in any way. Unfortunately, the U.S. leaders have entrusted the authority to command the armed forces to someone whose imbalance, dangerous, and wrong positions and decisions has dragged the U.S. Army into a deadly quagmire. Enough of that. I just thought it was interesting that on the back end of the hack, they're putting out, you know, the Donald Trump Epstein affiliation, and if perhaps that information by Israel is the reason that he's acting in their interest. All right, we got plenty more to cover. It's going to be a long episode, but I'm having fun. David Allen, maybe this thing that's giving victory to our enemies is the fact that we keep losing wars to much weaker enemies, and what we are trying to fight now, but this is different. We're going to win this. Nicholas Linder, the word war derives from late Old English where or wern, originated from Old North French where, thanks for that comment. Cayeno, it makes more sense. James, giving it a smiley face. Junior toxicity. If you don't use the military, then it will go to waste like it's old milk is quite the take. All right, we got more. What do we got next? This is Mark Levin, Troops on the Ground. I haven't even watched it yet, but let's hear Mark Levin pitching us on why we need troops on the ground.
I want to ask you,
Sorry. Oh my God. I had better notes. Here's Donald Trump. He wants to address the American people who are upset with him for getting us into a war when he said he wouldn't get us into a war. And so, you know, he's on with his friends over at Fox. They're asking him, hey, Donald Trump, how do I sell this for you? And then Donald Trump gives you the most 4-year-old answer you could ever hear of, I have an uncle and he knows nukes better than anybody and nukes are terrible. It's like the little kid. Well, my dad works in a store, so I know the way that this works. And then gives you no information on nukes whatsoever. Nothing that anybody on Earth doesn't know. Nukes are very bad. It's like Kamala Harris level. Nukes aren't good. They can blow up a lot of people, hurt people. You needed an uncle who worked at MIT to have this brilliant information on nuclear technology. Roll a clip.
How do you deal with people who might be disappointed because they voted, let's say they voted for you on the assumption of no wars, and then this happens and it's inconsistent with their wishes? What would you say to them?
Well, I have to do something in terms of making America great and keeping America great. And when you have lunatics with nuclear weapons and the power is beyond belief. I will tell you, as a president, I get to see it. My uncle was a great professor at MIT, and he knew more about nuclear at the time than anybody. He told me stories that were horrible in terms of the power, both beautiful in terms of putting it to good use, but really bad for destruction purposes. And his statements from years ago were, he really got it. He really got it. He was a high.
Unlike the rest of us who don't understand the risk of nuclear wars, Donald Trump understands them because he had an uncle who taught at MIT, and he really understands that nukes can be dangerous. So, Donald Trump is coming at this with a lot more information that you or I have, and that's why you should trust his decision-making process, because the rest of us did not realize that nukes could be a risk. But Donald Trump had an uncle at MIT and has the inside information that none of us were privy to, and that's why he's able to make decisions this wise that otherwise none of us could comprehend. And let us all say, Amen. All right, let's roll this clip.
We're talking about this. There are some in the Iranian regime that are going around saying that they want to make the Strait of Hormuz tolling thing, they want to make it permanent. That's unacceptable. The whole world should be outraged by it.
But what if they're not? What if the whole world just wants to get its oil and is okay with getting along with Iran? What if everyone just goes, you know what? All right, this kind of sucks. We got to spend $1 million a boat, but it's cheaper to mark up gas at the $1 million a boat versus, them taking out oil fields and infrastructure endlessly and us just not having oil. So between these two bad options, because of the mess that you got us into, we'd rather just stop saying that Iran is the enemy. We'll just pay them to get along. They can be pirates. They can run the Hormuz. And what if everyone else just thinks that it's acceptable to them and that we don't have to actually continue to fight this war?
We're impacted.
We might see the Israel knock it off campaign.
By it a little bit, but the rest of the world.
And of course, Israel turn around and go, look at how anti-Semitic Europe is. They've got a history of anti-Semitism. That's the only reason why they're saying this, is because their anti-Semitic history is coming back.
Is impacted by it a lot more, including many of the countries represented today here at the G7. And so if those countries are deeply impacted by it, all we've said is, you guys need to do something about it. We'll help you, but you guys are going to need to be ready to do something about it. Because when this conflict and when this operation ends, if the Iranians decide, well, now we control the Straits of Hormuz, and you can only go through here if you pay us, and if we allow you to, that's, not only is it illegal under international law and maritime law, it's unacceptable. And that can't be allowed to exist.
That can't be allowed. You know why? Because it's bad for Israel. Because it can't be allowed. It can't be accepted. It's illegal. Yeah, but what if everyone else decides that that's the best case scenario right now? Then what are you going to do?
And so what we've said is that the countries that are most impacted by that should be willing to do something about it, and we'll help them. And that's what I said.
Yeah, everyone else should be upset by this new arrangement because of the mess that we made. And even if you think it's easier just to pay Iran, you better get on board. We're willing to help you out to get out of this mess that we're in and spend more money than what you're going to spend on the boat fee for the entire year, losing your soldiers and men's and your military getting involved in this mess. All right, we got even more clips. What do we got here? Producer man, it's not playing. I'm flowing. Everyone's enjoying the show. And now you don't even have the thing working.
And who is against?
Yeah, we got to play this from the beginning. So, listen, I'm just, I think we're all at the point now that we're just, it's like, dude, Israel somehow, they got away with the Gaza thing, and we could have just moved on. And then they had to double down on the Iran thing and stay in all of our lives and just, continue to bring us down this hole of a mess. And now you've got the video coming out of Netanyahu saying that I can control the height of the flames. This is in regards to giving direct cash over to Hamas. I think it was conspiratorial almost beforehand. Dave spoke about it quite a bit, that, Israel didn't want to actually have to engage in a peace process or create an arrangement that was, allowed for both them to have a right to exist and the people, the Palestinians that live in Israel, to also have a right to exist. And so they wanted to make sure that instead of having a two-state solution or having to deal with these other people, They propped up the terrorist regime so they could go, look, all these people support the terrorist regime. We can't possibly make peace with the terrorist regime. And then Netanyahu, because he is the devil, it's reasonable for him to say, I can control the height of the flames. That's actually interesting and reasonable when it comes from him because, you know, it's possible. You would think that the devil would be able to control the heights of the flames. But here, this is a leaked interrogation video. I think Tucker Carlson got his hands on it. And I don't want to do the thing reading. I'm just going to play a couple seconds of the clip, but this is him talking to, these two law enforcement Israeli officers and letting them know why it is that he was sending cash directly to Hamas. And it's because I own them, I can lie to them, and I can control the height of the flames.
The public blames Netanyahu for October 7th as the one who fed the beast. He did not create Hamas, but he fed it.
All right, I've had enough of that one. What do we got? We got a couple more topics, and then we're headed to the paywall. All right, this came out from, I think, I was reading it in Zero Hedge, but it was referenced from Just the News. And at the moment, I guess it's an uninvestigated storyline, but it's a fascinating one that, listen, we were all wondering just how corrupt the Joe Biden was and how much money he was moving through the Ukraine. But you've got a storyline here of that essentially USAID was sending money over to the Ukraine. They had a perfect, oh my God, what a grift, sending money in the middle of a war where supposedly we're sending resources over to the Ukraine so that they can so that they can fight Russia. And while you're doing that, you also send money over to the Ukraine for clean energy in Ukraine, which can you find a bigger gold mine of a bottomless pit of if you're looking to make money just disappear than running with a clean energy initiative while a country is fighting a war? I mean, just talk about a project that was never going to happen, was never going to get done, and if it did, wouldn't actually be of any value to anybody. I mean, you thought you had a bottomless pit of money that you could just throw cash into and then it would magically just appear in somebody's wallet on the other end. You had windmills in the United States of America. But this is an even better scheme when in the middle of a war, you decide that it's important to have clean energy in a war zone that's being bombed. And so they knew, hey, if we say that this money's going for green energy over in the Ukraine, if that gets approved, nobody's looking at where that money's going to. And by the time they realize that it's ridiculous, the money will already be out the door and you'll never track it. And the claim is that essentially it was coming back to American contractors who were then going to put it into the Joe Biden campaign. I mean, put it on the list of things that Donald Trump will probably fumble and never take a look at, but you want a good storyline for going after the Democrats, corruption in the Democratic Party, and actually showcasing, I mean, Donald Trump's about as bad as you can be, but sometimes it's a good reminder that, the Democrats are equally evil and corrupt. And my guess is nothing will come of this storyline, but talk about a good one to investigate. All right. And here's, one of the nice things about Trump is that at least he gives us like real things to worry about. Sure, it's messes that he creates, wars that we don't need to be in, tariffs that we don't need to have, overspending that we don't need to do, and then talking about cutting the interest rate because I'm a low interest rate guy. I'd like to spend even more of future money. Usually Donald Trump forces us to engage in rather pressing and immediate problems, which is nice because then at least we don't have to go into the buffoonery of global warming. And you don't have to read through these science articles that you barely understand. But, this is worth highlighting. Both sides took a victory on this, but essentially they ran a study and looking deep in the ice. They're able to look at CO2 levels and methane levels from earlier periods of time. And when there was a giant cooling incident earlier, there was no correlation with higher levels of CO2, which the people that think that climate change is not an imminent threat are saying, hey, what proof do you have that the CO2 changes the environment? And then, of course, the people that do believe that the global warming is an imminent threat turn around and go, no, we have bombshell proof that CO2 does raise temperatures in the atmosphere, and this is just one data point, and so it doesn't disprove what we're talking about. If you're a science nerd, you can dig into that a little bit more, but that's the short. All right, we're going to cover two more things, then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go over to robbernsteincomedy.com for some paywalled action. And so this one is, I have an idea for how we might be able to fix government. Firstly, the whole TSA shutdown issue it's ridiculous. They charge you money on your ticket. I think it's currently $5. Just go to $10 a ticket. Flying is not a right. It's a luxury good. And, it'll basically be a tax out of everyone's ticket who is flying at the airport that we're paying out of pocket for the TSA experience. I would rather if the airlines just handled their own security. I'm sure it could be quicker, cheaper, and more efficient. But once you come to accept, now here's the buffoonery. It's $5 a ticket that goes to the TSA, and then that money does not go to the TSA. It's then used for other programs, and then the TSA needs more money from it's just stupid. Just self-fund it. Whatever the cost is, just add it on to the ticket, and then you can self-fund the TSA, and then you don't end up with this mess of all of us being, straggled at the airport. I don't think that's a word. Anyways, but finally, the reason why this went away was because at 2 a.m, the politicians are sitting around. They want to go home for the weekend. They realize that their flights are going to be delayed. And so they finally cave and just go, you know what? We got to figure out how to fund this one. I don't want to get stuck on a flight, not being able to fly tomorrow. I don't want to be in all these lines. And we got to figure out how to somehow leverage this into a better model of governance where these people's personal needs are somehow actually tied into what we need. Like, on healthcare, whatever the average wait time is, enforce that a politician has to go through that exact average wait time until they can actually see a doctor. Or whatever percentage of Americans are paying should be coming out of their congressional paycheck. I'm just saying, typically speaking, they're not actually tied into the costs of all of the things that they're doing, so they don't look for changes. And in this case, they were actually going to be stuck on long lines at the airport that they initiated a change for their own good and their own benefit, or like whatever average flat tires most Americans get because they don't fill potholes in the road. We should have the ceremonial stabbing of congressional tires where it's legally permitted to give them the amount of flat tires that we all had in that year. What are some other major issues that just go unaddressed in this country, and how can we actually tie congressional performance into that if we're not getting what we're supposed to get, they have to suffer as well? Because that's the only way that changes are made. All right, and then here's the last topic for today. Florida renames Palm Beach Airport for President Trump. It's not enough that he has his name on countless buildings. It's not enough the Kennedy Center. It's not enough he's putting his name on currency. This guy wants his name on everything. And Ron DeSantis, he's a pal, so he'll spend $2 million renaming the airport in Donald Trump's honor. And by the time the Donald Trump presidency is over, how much cash do you think we'll have spent just renaming things, as a tribute for Donald Trump? All right, let's take some comments, and then we're going to go over to paywalled. Topics for today is, I used to do travel gripes at the start of the show, so got some travel gripes from my recent travels. I got a new video of Rabbi Shmuley, and I'm going to tell you what you can do to defeat Rabbi Shmuley. It's like rock, paper, scissors, shoot, There's a play. There's a play that it's peaceful. It's totally peaceful, and it just undermines this whole thing, and somebody just exposed Rabbi Shmuley's weakness. And I'm going to show you that video. The importance of creating a track record for people that get their media analysis completely wrong, and what happened that women are suddenly realizing the differences in the physicality between sexes. All right, let's take some comments. David Allen, I have an idea that will fix both. Will both fix all the potholes and solve the illegal immigration problem. I don't think the liberals will like it. You'll see the potholes with. I thought you were going to propose something peaceful, like the illegal immigrants get put to work filling potholes. They fill enough potholes and then they get to stay. I thought that's where you were going with that. That's the kind of comment I would expect from a runaway Slav. Runaway Slav, no glasses needed. Physical and behavior traits are enough to detect a chicken swinger. I don't know if I'm familiar with the term chicken swinger. Skyle Actual, it was added to the price of the ticket. Congress moved a chunk of it to the general fund to pay down the federal debt. And I know. And then, by the way, they need more money than what's actually added to the ticket, because apparently it's like the equivalent of $10 a ticket would actually cover the TSA. It's just such stupidity. So you take in $5, then you send $250 to pay down the debt, except it's actually not enough money to cover what they're doing. So you got to take money back in. Just charge what it would be and have it be self-funded. David Allen 7404. I think that the rabbi is the one who sells the butt plugs, right? Yes, you have that correct. Senior extraordinaire. I opened YouTube and it brought me here. It knows what's best. I guess in this case, usually the algorithm doesn't do us any favors, but I guess in this case, for the win. All right. That's it, guys. That's the full episode. I got to start setting up Porch Tour soon. Shoot me an email, robsnewsroom@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, we're going to the live stream now. I will see you over there in about 5 minutes. Later, everybody.